So I've just seen this tweet about Max Holloway wanting a fight with Charles Oliveira for the BMF belt, and it got me kind of reignited my thoughts on the BMF belt. And if you don't know what the BMF belt is, it was it started in 2019, and it was kind of over the years it was kind of put aside for a couple of years, and then brought back out in 2023. And basically, what it is basically it's like a championship fight between two like fan favorites. That's the kind of consensus of what the BMF belt is. And if you don't know, also BMF belt stands for baddest mother effer. Not gonna swear yet, but um, I seen this tweet. Max Holloway has it because if you don't know, I'll run through the lineage of the BMF belt in a moment. But Max Holloway has it just now. He's a fan favorite. He wants to fight Charles Oliveira, as Charles Oliveira just beat, I think it was about a month or so ago, he beat Mateus Gamrot. And obviously Charles Oliveira himself is a big fan favourite. I'd go far enough to say that Charles Oliveira is a bigger name than Max Holloway, just to do with the, like you see all these edits of him and stuff like that. But yeah, I want to talk about the BMF and why I do not like it. I can't stand the BMF belt. It is it's kind of contributing to the downfall of the UFC, or the stagnation of the UFC, as we're kind of seeing right now with the lazy promotion and lazy matchmaking by Dana White and by the whole company, as a matter of fact. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the BMF belt, and just really quickly, if you don't know. So it started when, where is it? So 2019, it started with Jorge Masvidal versus Nate Diaz, and this is, in my opinion, the only relevant. Obviously, this is the inauguration, the initial BMF belt championship fight, but it wasn't done as a championship fight. This was done as more like a, because it was Nate Diaz, was he just beat, I believe it was Anthony Pettis about 2 months before, 3 months before, and he called it George Masvidal, who had just knocked out Ben Askren. And he was like, these guys are both like, the one's from California, one's from Stockton. No, was Miami. Stockton's in California, and so and they were both two street dogs, the baddest mother effer, and it's like it's kind of like it's warranted. It's a warranted name to attach. So they had that fight, and everyone obviously ended kind of badly, but from a cut, but it was it was it was warranted. It was a warranted fight to call a BMF fight, and everyone thought it was gonna be a one-off, and well, it was technically, but then Masvidal retired a couple years later, and then they were like, "Oh, let's give it to Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje." They fought this, and in this, from when the BM, this is my problem with the BMF belt. The BMF belt, this fight and after, and every fight after it, where it's been, fought over. I think it's been three, one, two, three. Yeah, three. For some reason, this doesn't have the Holloway Poirier fight, but anyway. So every fight after including the Gaethje and Poirier one, is it is basically an excuse to headline a pay per view without an actual fight. AKA, like, the UFC don't have to actually put together a good card. They could just put on two fan favourites, chuck a label it as a BMF title fight, because they call them BMF championship fights. Dana, when UFC 300 happened, that was when Gaethje and Holloway were fighting for the BMF belt, when Max Holloway knocked out Gaethje in like the last second. That was labelled as, UFC 100 was labelled, 300 was labelled as a triple title card, like it was three title fights. But it was really two, because it was only Hill versus Pereira in the main event, and then I think it was, who was it again? Zhang Weili versus Yan Zhonang. And then under that one, it was the Holloway Gaethje fight. But it's not a championship fight. It's not like, even though, don't get me wrong, they are big names, but, and they're exciting to watch. Like, who doesn't want to watch a Justin Gaethje fight, for example? But it's just an excuse to not have a championship fight. Like, specifically with this card here, the one with Poirier and Gaethje. no, there was no title fight on that card. This was the main event. This was the title fight in quotation marks, and it just it just doesn't allow to actual good fights. And you're seeing it even tonight. There's a what was it? The fight night card between who was it? I can't remember who's fighting. That's how much I've just forgot about it. But it's like the one of the worst, weakest cards ever. Like in the recent, probably in the last like 5 years, one of top five maybe. Like Ante Dilly has in the main event. That's kind of why I've remembered it. But and then with Max Holloway wanting to fight Charles Oliveira, yes, that is a good fight. That is a really good fight. I'm sure everyone wants to see that. But they're gonna stick that if that fight happens, they're gonna put it in the main event, and it's gonna just. And don't get me wrong, that is a good main event fight, but it's like for a pay per view, you want to see the championship fights. You want to see the best of the best. Holloway and Oliveira have both just basically just lost to Topuria, so they can't challenge for a title, especially Oliveira. He just lost like 4 months ago, and it's like, yeah, I know I sound like a broken record. Like these are good fights, but we just can't have them as main events because the UFC are just getting so lazy. They're getting so lazy, and this just aids in the laziness. This is probably one of the reasons why they actually made it in the first place because uh, what happened was, I'll dive deeper into it for further context. So when the Nate Diaz Jorge Masvidal fight happened, I'll scroll up just to put it on the screen. When that fight happened, so Masvidal won, and this is another problem as well. When these BMF, the people who have the BMF belt, when they if they win that fight, a lot of time they will fight for the actual title. But for some reason they don't put the BMF belt on the line when they fight for the title. After the Nate Diaz Jorge Masvidal fight, Jorge Diaz Masvidal won. Then he fought Usman the summer after, and the belt wasn't even on the line. So if it was an actual belt, Usman should have been the BMF champ. And then obviously that should have went to Edwards, and then that should have went to Bilal, and then that should have went to, just now it should technically be JDM. JDM should technically be the BMF champion. But so after this fight, they didn't put it on the line, and then obviously Usman beat Masvidal, meaning that, and then it's like all his aura went because he basically just got hugged for 5 rounds and foot stomped. If you ever watched that fight, and then they just never talked about it ever again. And then it was as if he lost it, and it just never existed. And then in 2023, when because Masvidal fought, I think it was Burns in May 2023 in his retirement fight, he lost, retired, and then Dana White came out saying, right, the BMF belt is back on the line because Masvidal retired, and then that's when they made Poirier versus Gaethje. And then, what was it? Because I'm trying to remember what the fight was before this. It was, I can't remember. Anyway, these guys fought. Gaethje won, head kick knockout. And then they needed a fight for UFC 300. They put Max Holloway versus Gaethje. Holloway obviously won. So Holloway was the BMF champ. And then Holloway then fought. I don't know why the picture's not here, by the way. I have no idea. Then Holloway fought Topuria in a title fight for the featherweight title, because this was a lightweight. He went back down to featherweight. Fought Topuria, got beat, but Topuria somehow isn't the BMF champ. Why? Why was that belt not on the line? What's the point if the belt's not always on the line? Isn't that the whole point? If the BMF gets knocked out, how is it still the BMF? You know what I'm saying? It's basically because then the BMF would also be the champion. Then they would have. Then it's like you might as well just put the championship fight on the pay per view. So that's the whole reason of the BMF belt is so that they don't have to have a championship fight on a pay per view. It's a free fight to put on a pay per view. You market it as a title fight, even though it's not really. And it's just the cheap way of the UFC being able to do what they want, and fans sucking it up and being like, oh, even though this should be a title fight, it's technically a title fight. It's the BMF title, and then they can just sell it and people will eat it up because it's a a fan favorite fight. But yeah, that's kind of all I wanted to mention about this, and it just really the UFC is just getting to me right now. It's like they're getting a bit better, but it's not that good. Anyway, I'll thanks for watching, like and subscribe. It really helps out, and I'll see you later. Bye.